I discovered my identical twin sister who was stolen at birth was living parallel life in same city. She had my job, my interests, and people kept confusing us. It started with small things that I brushed off as coincidences. A barista at a coffee shop I'd never visited before greeting me by name and asking about my usual order. A woman at the grocery store asking how my art classes were going when I'd never taken an art class in my life. A man at the gas station thanking me for the amazing dinner last week when I was certain we'd never met. At first, I thought these people were just confusing me with someone else. I have one of those faces, I told myself. It happens to everyone sometimes. But the incidents kept happening with increasing frequency. A postal worker asked why I'd changed my address without filing the proper paperwork. A librarian reminded me that my book was overdue when I hadn't checked out any books. A restaurant hostess seated me at my usual table at a place I'd never set foot in before. You must have a doppelganger somewhere, my best friend Maya said when I told her about the latest case of mistaken identity. Someone who looks exactly like you. I laughed it off, but privately I was starting to feel unsettled. The encounters were becoming too frequent and too specific to be simple cases of mistaken identity. The breaking point came when I was visiting my grandmother in the hospital. As I walked through the cardiac wing, a nurse stopped me in the hallway. "Sarah, I'm so glad you came back," she said warmly. "Your grandmother has been asking about you all morning. She was so worried when you left crying yesterday." I stared at her in confusion. "I'm sorry, but I think you have me confused with someone else. I haven't been here since last week, and my grandmother is in the oncology wing, not cardiac." The nurse looked puzzled. "But you were here yesterday visiting Mrs. Patterson in room 304. You were wearing that same blue sweater." "Mrs. Patterson isn't my grandmother, and I wasn't wearing this sweater yesterday." The nurse studied my face carefully, her confusion deepening. "I could have sworn you look exactly like her. Even your voice is the same." After she walked away, I stood in that hospital corridor feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. This wasn't just someone who resembled me. This was someone who apparently looked and sounded identical to me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the strange encounters over the past few months. The barista who knew my usual order. The librarian with my overdue book. The nurse who was certain she'd seen me yesterday. What if they weren't cases of mistaken identity? What if there really was someone out there who looked exactly like me? The next morning, I called my mom and asked a question that had been nagging at me since the hospital incident. "Mom, was I adopted?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Why would you ask that? Just answer the question. Was I adopted?" "No, honey, you're my biological daughter. Why are you asking?" I explained about the strange encounters and my growing suspicion that someone who looked exactly like me was living somewhere nearby. "That's ridiculous," my mother said, but her voice sounded strained. "People get confused all the time. You're reading too much into this." But something about her tone didn't sit right with me. She sounded nervous, almost defensive. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to these encounters. Instead of just correcting people and walking away, I began asking questions. The barista who knew my usual order told me I came in every Tuesday and Thursday morning for a large oat milk latte with an extra shot of espresso. She said I was always friendly and usually mentioned my graphic design work. I was a graphic designer, but I'd never been to that coffee shop, and I hated oat milk. The librarian showed me the overdue book supposedly checked out under my name. It was a biography of Georgia O'Keeffe, and the signature on the checkout card looked exactly like my handwriting. "You were so excited about this book," the librarian said. "You told me you were thinking about switching from graphic design to fine art." I'd never considered switching careers, but the signature was unmistakably mine. The restaurant hostess walked me to a corner table and mentioned that I usually came in on Friday nights with a tall man with dark hair. She described him as charming and said we seemed very much in love. I hadn't been on a date in 6 months. Each piece of information painted a picture of someone living a life that was similar to mine but different in key ways. Someone who shared my appearance, my handwriting, even my voice, but who had made different choices about coffee preferences, career paths, and romantic relationships. I decided to do some investigating. I started with the coffee shop, arriving on a Tuesday morning to see if my doppelganger would show up for her usual order. I waited for 2 hours, nursing a regular coffee and watching the door. Just when I was about to give up, she walked in. I nearly dropped my cup. It was like looking in a mirror. Not just similar features or a passing resemblance, this woman was identical to me in every detail. Same height, same build, same dark hair cut in the same style. Even her mannerisms were familiar, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, her slightly lopsided smile, the way she gestured with her hands while talking. She ordered the oat milk latte the barista had described, chatting easily about a design project she was working on. Her voice was my voice. Her laugh was my laugh. I watched in stunned silence as she paid for her coffee and left, my mind reeling with questions. Who was this woman? How could she look exactly like me? And why was she living what seemed like an alternate version of my life? I followed her at a distance, my heart pounding. She walked 3 blocks to a small graphic design studio and let herself in with a key. Through the window, I could see her settling at a desk. just like I did every morning at my own job across town. I stood on the sidewalk staring at the building, trying to process what I just witnessed. This wasn't just someone who resembled me, this was someone living a parallel life. That evening, I called my mother again. "I need you to tell me the truth," I said without preamble. "Do I have a twin sister?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had been disconnected. "Mom, are you there?" "Yes," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here. Do I have a twin?" Another long pause. Then, "Yes." The word hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean, yes? How could you not tell me I have a twin sister?" "It's complicated, Sarah. She was. She was taken from the hospital when you were born." "Taken? What do you mean, taken?" My mother started crying. "There was a mix-up at the hospital. A couple thought she was their baby. By the time anyone realized the mistake, they'd already left the state. We tried to find her, but what? But your father thought it might be better to let sleeping dogs lie. The other couple had been trying to have children for years. We had you. Everyone was happy. I felt like I was drowning. You let strangers raise my sister because it was convenient? It wasn't like that," my mother protested. "We tried to contact them, but they'd moved and changed their names. Private investigators, lawyers, police, we tried everything. Eventually, we had to accept that she was gone. And you never thought to tell me? What was the point? You'd never know her. We didn't want you to spend your whole life wondering about a sister you'd never meet. But I had met her. I'd been encountering evidence of her existence for months without realizing it. Her name," I said. "What's her name?" "We named her Emma," my mother said through her tears. "But we don't know what her adoptive parents called her." Over the next several days, I couldn't focus on anything except finding my sister. I knew where she worked, so I started there. I waited outside the graphic design studio until I saw her leave, then followed her home to a charming apartment building about 20 minutes from where I lived. I discovered her name was Elena, and she went by Ellie. She drove the same model car I did, but in blue instead of red. She shopped at the same grocery store I frequented, but on different days. She even banked at the same credit union. It was like looking at an alternate version of my own life. We'd made similar major decisions, education, career, even our taste in apartments, but different smaller choices that had led us down parallel paths. I spent a week gathering information about Elena's life before I worked up the courage to approach her. I was terrified of how she might react to learning about me, but I couldn't continue living with the knowledge of her existence without making contact. I decided to approach her at the coffee shop where I'd first seen her. On a Thursday morning, I positioned myself at a table near the counter and waited for her to arrive. When she walked in and ordered her usual oat milk latte, I stood up and intercepted her on her way out. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaking. "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think we need to talk." She turned around and froze when she saw me. Her coffee cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, sending hot liquid splashing across both our shoes. "Oh my God," she whispered, staring at my face. "Oh my God. I think we might be sisters," I said. Elena's legs gave out and she sank into the nearest chair. The barista rushed over with towels to clean up the spilled coffee, but Elena didn't seem to notice. She just kept staring at me with wide, shocked eyes. "This isn't possible," she said finally. "This can't be real." I sat down across from her. "I know it's a shock. I've been trying to figure out how to approach you for days. You know who I am? I know your name is Elena and you work at the design studio down the street. I know people have been confusing us for months." Elena shook her head slowly. "I thought I was losing my mind. People kept thanking me for things I hadn't done, talking about conversations I'd never had. Same here. A nurse at the hospital thought I'd visited a patient I'd never met. We stared at each other in silence for a moment, both trying to process the surreal situation. "Are we really sisters?" Elena asked. "Twins, I think. Identical twins." Elena reached across the table and touched my hand, as if she needed physical confirmation that I was real. "I always felt like something was missing," she said quietly. "Like there was supposed to be someone else. My parents never understood what I meant." She nodded. "They're wonderful people. They adopted me when I was 3 days old. They said my birth mother couldn't take care of me." I explained what my mother had told me about the hospital mix-up and the failed attempts to find her. Elena listened with growing amazement and anger. "You mean I had a family this whole time? I had a sister and no one told me? Our parents thought it was better if we didn't know about each other." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I've been alone my whole life. Do you know what it's like to grow up feeling like there's a part of you missing?" I reached across and squeezed her hand. "You're not alone anymore." We spent the next 3 hours in that coffee shop, sharing our life stories and marveling at the similarities. We'd both been drawn to graphic design. We'd both struggled with the same insecurities and fears. We even had similar taste in music, books, and movies, but there were differences too. Elena was more outgoing and confident than me. She'd traveled extensively and had a serious boyfriend. She'd taken risks with her career that I'd been too scared to take. "It's like looking at who I could have been," I said as we compared our life choices, "or who I might have been if I'd made different decisions," Elena replied. As the shock wore off, Elena became increasingly angry about being separated from her biological family. "They stole 25 years from us," she said. 25 years of birthdays and holidays and just us being sisters. I know it's not fair, but they thought they were doing what was best. Best for who? Not for us. We had a right to know about each other. I couldn't argue with that. Learning about Elena's existence had felt like discovering a missing piece of myself that I hadn't even known was gone. Over the following weeks, Elena and I began building a relationship. We met for coffee several times a week, sharing childhood memories and filling in the gaps of our separate lives. I learned that Elena's adoptive parents, Michael and Diane, had struggled with infertility for years before adopting her. They'd loved her deeply and given her every opportunity, but they'd also been overprotective in ways that had shaped her rebellious streak. They were so afraid of losing me, Elena explained. They monitored everything I did, every friend I made. I think they always worried that someone would try to take me away. Elena had rebelled against their overprotection by becoming fiercely independent. She'd moved out at 18, traveled solo through Europe, and built a successful freelance design business. She'd cultivated a life full of adventure and spontaneity. In contrast, I'd stayed close to home, building a stable but predictable life. I worked for a large firm, lived in the same city I'd grown up in, and rarely took risks that might disrupt my carefully planned future. "You're the responsible one," Elena observed during one of our coffee meetings. "I'm the wild one." Classic twin dynamic, even though we didn't know we were twins. As we got to know each other, I began to see how our separation had shaped both our personalities. Elena's independence had been forged by not knowing she had family to rely on. My caution had been reinforced by having family support that made taking risks feel unnecessary. But the more time we spent together, the more I realized how much I'd missed by not having a sister. Elena understood me in ways that friends never had. She could finish my sentences, predicted my reactions, and shared an intuitive connection that felt both thrilling and comforting. "It's like finding the other half of my soul," Elena said one evening as we walked through the park near her apartment. I knew exactly what she meant. For the first time in my life, I felt complete. But our reunion also raised difficult questions about our families and our past. Elena wanted to confront our biological parents about the decision to stop looking for her. She also wanted to meet them, despite her anger about the separation. "They're my family too," she said when I mentioned my concerns about family drama. "I have a right to know them." I arranged a dinner at my apartment where Elena could meet our parents. I was nervous about how it would go given Elena's anger and our parents' guilt about the situation. The meeting was emotionally charged from the moment Elena walked through the door. Our mother burst into tears at seeing her lost daughter, while our father stood awkwardly by, clearly struggling with his own emotions. "You look exactly like Sarah," our mother sobbed, reaching out to touch Elena's face. "My baby girl." Elena stepped back, her expression guarded. "I'm not your baby girl. I haven't been your anything for 25 years. The evening was tense and difficult. Elena demanded answers about why our parents had stopped looking for her and why they'd chosen not to tell me about her existence. "We thought it would be too painful," our father explained. "For everyone involved." "Too painful for who?" Elena shot back. "You decided what was best for me without ever asking what I wanted." Our mother tried to explain their reasoning, but Elena wasn't interested in their justifications. She wanted acknowledgement that they'd made the wrong choice. "I needed my sister," Elena said, looking at me across the dinner table. "I needed my family. You took that away from me." The conversation went in circles, with our parents trying to defend their decisions and Elena expressing her anger and hurt. I found myself caught in the middle, understanding both perspectives but unable to fix the situation. By the end of the evening, nothing was resolved. Elena left feeling frustrated and angry, while our parents were devastated by her rejection of their attempts to explain. "She hates us," our mother said after Elena left. "She doesn't hate you," I assured her. "She's just hurt. Give her time." But time didn't seem to be healing Elena's anger. If anything, she became more resentful as she learned more details about our family history. She discovered that our parents had photos of me at every stage of my childhood, but no pictures of her after the hospital mix-up. She learned about family traditions and inside jokes that she'd never been part of. She saw evidence of the life she'd missed and the family connections she'd been denied. "They replaced me with just you," she said bitterly during one particularly difficult conversation. "They had one daughter instead of two, and they were fine with that." "That's not true. They grieved for you. Not enough to keep looking." Elena's pain was understandable, but it was also affecting our relationship. She sometimes seemed to resent me for having the family life she'd been denied, even though neither of us had chosen the circumstances of our separation. "I'm not responsible for what happened," I reminded her when she made comments about my privileged upbringing. "I know that," she said, "but it still hurts to see what I missed." Despite the family drama, Elena and I continued building our sisterly bond. We discovered we had similar talents and interests, shared the same sense of humor, and even had some of the same quirky habits. We also began exploring the practical implications of our identical appearance. Elena's friends and coworkers were amazed by our resemblance, and we found ourselves fielding constant questions about being twins. "Have you ever switched places?" was the most common question, followed by, "Can you read each other's minds?" We hadn't tried switching places, but the idea was tempting. Elena had always been curious about my more structured structured lifestyle, while I was intrigued by her adventurous approach to life. We could try it for a day, Elena suggested. You could take my meetings while I handle your corporate job. The idea was both exciting and terrifying. What if we got caught? What if we couldn't pull it off? But the more we talked about it, the more appealing it became. We were essentially identical in appearance, and we'd been learning each other's mannerisms and speech patterns for weeks. One day, I agreed, just to see if we can do it. We planned the switch carefully. Elena studied my work schedule and learned about my current projects. I practiced her more casual mannerisms and memorized details about her clients and friends. On the chosen day, we met early in the morning to exchange clothes and final details. Elena would go to my office and handle my administrative tasks while I managed her client consultations and design work. If anyone gets suspicious, just say you're not feeling well, Elena advised. That'll explain any differences in personality. The switch was surprisingly successful. I enjoyed the creative freedom of Elena's freelance work, while she found my corporate environment more interesting than she'd expected. Your coworkers are nice, Elena said when we met for lunch, and your boss isn't as stuffy as you made him sound. Your clients are more demanding than mine, I replied, but the creative challenges are exciting. We were both energized by the experience of stepping into each other's lives, even temporarily. It gave us a new appreciation for the different paths we'd taken and the choices that had shaped our personalities, but the switch also highlighted how different our lives really were. Elena's world was full of uncertainty and creative challenges, while mine offered stability and predictable growth. I couldn't live your life permanently, Elena admitted. Too much structure for me. And I couldn't handle the constant uncertainty of freelancing, I replied. We were identical in appearance, but had developed into distinct individuals with different values and priorities. As our relationship deepened, Elena began to soften her stance toward our parents. She was still angry about the separation, but she was also curious about the family she'd missed. Tell me about family holidays, she said one evening as we looked through photo albums. What were they like growing up? I shared memories of Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations, and summer vacations. Elena listened with a mixture of sadness and fascination, trying to picture herself in the scenes I described. I had good holidays with Michael and Diane, she said, but they were always just the three of us. I used to wonder what it would be like to have a big family gathering. You could come to Christmas this year, I suggested carefully, if you want to. Elena considered the invitation for several days before agreeing to join us for Christmas dinner. It would be the first time she'd celebrated a holiday with our biological family. The Christmas gathering was emotional but successful. Elena was still guarded around our parents, but she seemed to enjoy meeting our extended family and experiencing the traditions she'd missed. She fits right in, our grandmother observed, watching Elena laugh with our cousins. It's like she was never gone. But Elena was quick to correct that impression. I was gone, she reminded everyone, for 25 years. That can't be erased by one holiday dinner. Despite her continued anger about the past, Elena began to build tentative relationships with our family members. She was particularly drawn to our grandmother, who had insisted from the beginning that the family should never have stopped looking for her. Your grandmother never gave up hope, our mother told Elena. She always said you'd come back to us someday. I didn't come back, Elena corrected. I was found, by accident. The distinction was important to Elena. She wanted everyone to understand that their reunion was chance, not the result of family effort or intention. As the months passed, Elena and I settled into a comfortable sisterly relationship. We talked daily, met for dinner several times a week, and had even planned a vacation together. I never thought I'd have a sister, Elena said as we booked flights for a trip to Italy. This feels like a dream sometimes. A good dream or a weird dream? Both, she laughed, but mostly good. Elena also began dating someone new, a man named David who was fascinated by our twin story. He often joined us for dinner and seemed to enjoy the novelty of having an identical sister-in-law. You two finish each other's sentences, he observed one evening. It's like you've known each other your whole lives. We have, Elena replied. We just didn't know it. The comment made me think about the connection Elena and I had felt from our first meeting. Despite being separated since birth, we'd immediately understood each other in ways that felt intuitive and natural. Do you think we would have been close if we'd grown up together? I asked Elena later that evening. I think we would have been inseparable, she replied. Maybe too inseparable. Our parents might have had trouble telling us apart. They might not have let us develop our own identities. Elena nodded. Maybe being separated forced us to become individuals first. Now we can be sisters by choice instead of just circumstance. It was a comforting way to think about our unusual situation. Instead of focusing on what we'd lost, we could appreciate what we'd gained the opportunity to choose each other as adults. 6 months after our first meeting, Elena surprised me with news that would change both our lives again. I'm moving, she announced over coffee. Moving? Where? Here, to your neighborhood. I found an apartment 2 blocks from yours. I was thrilled by the news, but also concerned. Are you sure that's what you want? We've been taking things slowly. I've never been more sure of anything, Elena said. I lost 25 years with my sister. I don't want to lose any more time. Elena's move to my neighborhood marked a new phase in our relationship. We became not just sisters, but also daily companions, sharing everything from grocery shopping to evening walks. People are going to think we're weird, I warned her. Two grown women who look identical and spend all their time together. Let them think what they want, Elena replied. I don't care what strangers think about my relationship with my sister. Our closeness did attract attention and sometimes confusion. Servers at restaurants would mix up our orders. Neighbors couldn't tell us apart. Even our friends sometimes struggled to identify which twin they were talking to. You need to develop some distinguishing features, our friend Maya suggested. Maybe different hairstyles or something. But Elena and I liked confusing people. We'd developed a playful dynamic around our identical appearance, sometimes switching roles in low-stakes situations just for fun. It's like having a superpower, Elena said after we'd successfully confused a pushy salesperson by taking turns talking to him. A very specific and not very useful superpower, I replied. Useful enough. Looking back now, a year after our first meeting, I can't imagine my life without Elena. She's brought adventure, spontaneity, and a sense of completeness that I didn't even know I was missing. Our relationship isn't perfect. We still sometimes clash over our different approaches to life, and Elena maintains a complicated relationship with our parents. But we've built something real and lasting out of the chaos of our accidental reunion. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen you in that coffee shop? Elena asked recently. We would have found each other eventually, I replied with certainty. We were living too close and had too many overlapping interests to avoid each other forever. You really think so? I know so. We were meant to be sisters. Elena smiled, even if it took us 25 years to figure it out. Finding my identical twin, living a parallel life in another city, taught me that family connections can transcend time, distance, and even knowledge of each other's existence. Elena and I may have been separated by circumstances beyond our control, but we found our way back to each other through a series of mistaken identities and chance encounters. Now we're making up for lost time, building the sisterly relationship we should have had all along, and proving that it's never too late to find the missing pieces of yourself. Sometimes the family you're meant to have finds you when you least expect it, even if they've been living just a few miles away your entire life.